This happened back when I was in the 10th grade. One day, after rugby practice, I came home exhausted and plopped myself down on my bed. It was almost immediately as I hit the pillow. My cousin, who was very much alive, was next to me, and we were in deep conversation. It all happened very normal, until she asked me, "Do you promise?" and held out her pinky, to which I immediately stuck out mine and wrapped it around hers. As soon as our pinkies tied, I couldn't move and the energy changed. I was looking up at the ceiling with my pinky wrapped to something else. This thing began to say things like,
"You are my wife forever. We are together always,"
etc. Still frozen and unable to move, I was absolutely freaking the fuck out. It then started to talk about temptation and telling me I was tempted while trying to open my legs. I used all my strength against this thing to seal my legs shut, and finally, I woke up drenched in sweat. This was the first incident. I ran downstairs to my mom and our roommate, who was more like my aunt, and told them what happened and how scared I was. I kept saying how it didn't feel like a dream or nightmare. It felt very real, and it only lasted 10 minutes in real time, but it felt like forever. Both of them thought it was very disturbing, but all they could do was tell me that, luckily, it wasn't real, and to take a hot shower, have a tea, and watch a funny movie with them afterwards. The following evening, my mom had gone to her friend's house and was planning to stay the night, so I stayed in her bedroom because she had air conditioning and I felt safer. I was sleepy but awake and was flicking through the channels to watch. So I'm pressing the channel button, and boom, the atmosphere changed. I began to feel like I weighed a ton. I couldn't lift up my arm and hold the TV remote. I sunk completely under the covers where I was, what felt like vacuum sealed under. I couldn't breathe or move to break free. I managed to swing myself off the bed. I felt drunk and could barely keep my body up. It felt like gravity was turned on to the highest notch. I managed to push myself into my aunt's room and plopped half my body onto her bed. I asked her to please help me. She turned over and calmly said, "Sweetie, I can't help you." I woke up gasping for air and crying. I turned the TV volume all the way up and grabbed the home phone, which was next to the bed, and called my mom and begged her to come home, even though it was the middle of the night and she was about an hour away. I knew it was that thing tormenting me. She came home, I told her what happened, and she slept with me that night. I didn't sleep a wink. A few days later, I came home from school exhausted, not because of rugby, but because I hadn't been sleeping. I would doze off and jump back awake. I would stay up all night, blasting music in my earbuds to prevent me from falling into that realm again. But this time, I was so tired I had to take a nap. I laid on my bed and let myself fall asleep. Seconds later, I'm looking at myself, lying on my bed. There's this tall, staticky black shadow with a pointy chin standing over me, speaking in a different language. Yet, I understood it. I couldn't go back to my body. I couldn't yell. All I could do was watch this being tower over my body that I wasn't in. I woke up and began to sob and ran to my aunt downstairs and begged her to help me. It was too much. My aunt was Catholic and had a bottle of holy water in her room. She said that we have to salt and spray the whole house and every corner with it, and that I will have to tell this thing to leave. I agreed, and we did it. I felt scared and odd about yelling out loud repeatedly to leave this house and to leave me alone. But it seemed to work. For weeks, nothing had happened. I couldn't believe it. Until one fucking night, I was sleeping and having a dream. I was downtown walking around, and this man was following me. He had a twisted up eyelid. Everywhere I would look, he was in the crowd as a focal point. All of a sudden, I'm back in my room, sitting on the edge of the bed with this tall man in front of me. In one hand, he had water, continuously pouring it out, and in the other, he had salt. He was talking nonsense until his voice changed and said,
Did you truly believe you could get rid of me? You thought salt and water would banish me?
And he started laughing. It was the most terrifying laugh I've ever heard. It surrounded me. It inflicted pain on my whole body. I woke up drenched in sweat again and ran to my mom and cried that it didn't work. It was back. We blessed the house again, despite what had happened. And that was it. I haven't had another incident since. My father doesn't believe in ghosts or the paranormal whatsoever. He told me this story once that he just couldn't explain, and to this day, it still baffles him. I'll tell it exactly how he told me. My father, being in his 20s, was dating a girl, and her dad absolutely hated him. One day, in the middle of summer in Texas, my father was on the way to her house. This was before cell phones was really a thing. When he got there, he tried to open the gate to her home, but he couldn't. He said it was frozen shut, and he couldn't unlatch it. He was so confused as to why, since he had never had a problem before, and he noticed that the gate was ice cold to the touch. He backed up and was trying to figure out what was going on. The gate then opened by itself and was no longer cold. He kind of freaked out. None of this made any sense. He got inside to tell his girlfriend what just happened, only to find her crying her eyes out. She had just found out that her father had passed away about an hour prior from an unexpected heart attack. My father believes that it was her father not wanting him to go inside the house. He can't logically explain what happened to him that day. I know it doesn't seem too scary, but if I saw a gate frozen on a hot summer day and then watched it unlatch itself in front of me, I would shit my pants. My dad still doesn't believe in ghosts for whatever reason, but he does tell me that something wasn't right that day. One night, when I was 7 or 8, I saw something that I now recognize as evil and not normal. I grew up in a town on the Navajo reservation. We lived in a neighborhood, and our neighbors were from different places within the region. This detail is important because Navajos like to live far from one another and only in the immediate vicinity of their relatives. For good reason. They don't like to live near strangers. So, this particular night, I was told to sleep in my older brother's room. His room had a bed, a box spring and mattress directly on the floor, and a dresser with a TV in the middle of the room. For curtains, he had linen, the see-through stuff that hides nothing, always fully closed. He didn't have posters, pictures, or anything else in his room. For some reason, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned and shut my eyes tightly until I saw neon rings outlining the darkness of my closed-eyed vision. I tried counting imaginary sheep, and still, I couldn't sleep. I don't know what time it was when the dog started barking and running with something. I sat up in bed and looked out the window. Moonlight lit our backyard, and I couldn't see anything. I merely listened to the dogs, who were out of sight. Then, from the house to my left, I heard something run with loud footsteps and dogs in pursuit. Within a split second, the footsteps approached my backyard and into my view. I saw something white run by the window, followed by the dogs. It looked like a hyena with an elongated neck and galloping gait. I also noticed that the neck stood more upright, like the angle of a giraffe's neck. At the time, I didn't know enough to fear what I saw. I didn't tell anybody until decades later. As an adult, I told my parents about what I saw that night, and they told me that back then, we lived next door to a witch, or a skinwalker. I had seen her leaving her home in animal form on that night. I recall that neighbor died within 1 or 2 years of me seeing the hyena.